Manju, this is Sunita Williams kind of suspense here. When are we getting launched? That was nice.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Now, did you like that?
Yes, it was very good.
An fresh video that was made just a couple of hours ago. And, we are still experimenting. We are still learning. Okay, so welcome to this edition, the 6th edition of Mellow Musings. What is Mellow Musings? People have been asking me, and I need to tell you all over again. We have a society, an academic society. It's one of the leading societies in the country and also, internationally too. We are very well known. We set it up in 1997. And since then, we have just been expanding. We have been adding to our numbers. And well, we've had a lot of conferences. We have at least one international conference every year and a lot of little events in between, some mini Mellow conferences also. Yes, Mellow is the name of the Society for the Study of the Multi-Ethnic Literatures of the World. And we've been around for 28 years and still counting. What do? Conferences, yes. We also bring out a journal, an e-journal. It is our office bearers and our volunteers and our students who bring it out, who do the editing, proofreading, and we put out the call for papers internationally across international borders. So we do that, and we invite speakers. We give a prize to the best young scholar who presents the best paper at our conference, and so much more. This year, January onward, we decided to add something more to our activities, and we have Mellow Musings. So every fortnight, we plan to meet like this and talk about mainly literature, yes, but a lot of other things that interest us and that can be linked with literature because we are living in a world that is interdisciplinary. In the video that you saw a little while ago, you saw a glimpse of the earlier sessions. And today we have another session that you are going to thoroughly enjoy. Okay, so on the screen we have two great guides. Hi, Yeshwant. This is
Hello,
Yeshwant.
good evening. Good evening, Manju.
And hi, Rajnish Wattas.
Hello, hello, hello.
Raj, yeah, Rajnish is from Chandigarh, Yeshwant is from Hyderabad, and I am sitting in Gurgaon. Now, this is the first time they are meeting on screen. This is the first time actually they got to know each other. And so I need to introduce them formally. Now, we have, let me begin with the speaker of the day, Yeshwant Ramamurthy. He is architect Yeshwant Ramamurthy, and he established Studio One Architects at Hyderabad in 1979. This is a consultancy firm which handles architecture, interior design, landscape, and heritage conservation. His firm is acknowledged among the 50 most influential practices in India. Yeshwant, I call him by the first name, huh? Yeshwant is a fellow of the Indian Institute of Architects and the Institute of Indian Interior Designers, in which professional guilds he has held offices at the regional and national levels. Over several years, he has engaged with academic pursuits as a teacher, juror, advisor to the architecture institutions across southern India. A design historian and ardent urbanist, he participates in seminars, makes research presentations, and conducts memory walks for the students and design fraternity of Hyderabad. The Indian Institute of Interior Designers and the Indian Institute of Architects have conferred on him Lifetime Achievement Awards in recognition of his professional standing. He is currently on the academic board of studies at Jawaharlal Nehru Architecture and Fine Arts University in Hyderabad and the ICFI School of Architecture in Hyderabad. Now, with this Hyderabad Design Forum, of which he is the president, he has curated and edited a documentation study, The Forgotten Stepwells of Telangana, which was released in December 2023. So just over a year ago, we are going to be talking about this book. On a personal level, I must tell you that I have known Yeshwant for a very long time. In fact, since 1967. We aren't all that old, but in 1967, well, we came together. It was just one of those quirks of life. And since then, we have been kind of in touch off and on. And well, this was a great time to call him to talk to all our colleagues, all our scholars who have logged in today and who may be interested in the stories that he has to tell, the stories of something so fascinating like stepwells. Are we not fascinated by Baulis? We've heard stories, we've heard legends, and we wondered what exactly goes into the making of these stepwells and why are all these stories woven around them? So we have Yeshwant talking to us about the stories, the legends of stepwells, and in conversation with him is Rajnish Wattas. Rajnish Wattas is the former principal of the Chandigarh College of Architecture and currently visiting professor at various institutions. An architectural historian, critic, author, and modern heritage expert, he has researched on cities architecture and landscape design intensively. He has authored a huge compendium of professional writings and published hundreds of essays, travelogues, and features in leading journals and newspapers such as the Tribune, Times of India, Hindustan Times, Indian Express, and the Hindu. He is the co-author of two books, Trees of Chandigarh, and the other book is Sukhna, Sublime Lake of Chandigarh. And he's the co-editor of a seminal book called Le Corbusier Rediscovered, Chandigarh and Beyond. Widely traveled, he has lectured at numerous prestigious forums in India and abroad, and he's been on various expert groups. He was the team member entrusted with evolving the master plan of Chandigarh 2031 and is currently a member of the Chandigarh Heritage Conservation Committee that oversees all the heritage issues of the city. Until recently, he was also on the Governor's Advisory Council for Art, Heritage and Tourism in Chandigarh and the founder president of the Chandigarh Tree Lovers group that promotes awareness about Chandigarh's landscape. So we have one person who is totally identified with Hyderabad and the other who is identified with the city beautiful that is Chandigarh. Rajnish is a multifaceted personality with a keen interest in the arts of India, and he is also an acclaimed photographer with numerous well received photo exhibitions and publications to his credit. Rajneesh, you dismissed your photography in just half a line, whereas I've seen your exhibitions and they're fantastic. So I'm sure you could talk a little more about them at some point, huh? Right? But welcome both of you, Yeshwant and Rajneesh. It's great having you over. And if I've known Yeshwant since 1967, I have known Rajneesh since 1974 or 75, maybe. So a long time. They're old friends and they're both very skilled at their jobs. So it's a great opportunity to bring them together. And who could be better to, as a moderator, who could be better today than Rajneesh talking and one expert talking to another? So I am going to hand over the proceedings now to Rajneesh. Over to you, Rajneesh. And we are looking forward to this conversation between you and Yeshwant.
Thank you, Manju, very much. And thank you, Yeshwant. It's a great, I can be heard well because of my throat
Yes,
issues.
we can hear you clearly.
Very nicely.
Yeah, but I'll have to speak short sentences. And Yashwantji, it's a extremely great privilege. I'm eternally grateful to Manju for bringing us together. And I've been so fascinated by your book ever since Manju was kind enough to share it with me. And as it is, I don't read books, I eat books, I chew books, and they are my favorite
Show them the
refuge.
copy. If you have it next to you, show them the copy.
I will, yeah.
Yeah, it's a fantastic book, huh?
Yes, sir.
Collector's item. It's huge, yeah. Mhm.
And as a history buff, this is you know double the luck. And but hello, something
Yes,
went
yes.
on the
No, no,
screen. Okay, okay. Then I should be on the main screen. You
you are
handle
on
all
the
that.
main screen. You
Okay.
are on the main screen.
So, we both have been introduced, and Yashwantji, who's the star of the evening, has been covered very well. And I'm even before meeting him virtually today, through his books, I was getting very fascinated by his multiple dimensions of intellectual inquiry and curiosity, and not just being an armchair theoretician, but get transforming it, translating it into action, and really doing a commendable job. It has been my considered opinion that every great city needs public interested citizens or experts who take lead in initiatives and conserve or raise issues about the great wealth which is for us to keep in patrimony for our coming generations. So I'm very happy that I have come across the Hyderabad man. And so without further much ado, I will step into the stepwells with him. The first thing that came to my mind when I got this book was that there is an old saying that the well doesn't walk to the thirsty. But in this case, the well has actually walked to us and is there on our screens because Yashwant embodies the spirit of the stepwells. And so I'm going to drink deep and share the waters with everyone else. So, but before we get into the various, multiple aspects, when I was leafing through the contents of the book, I usually pockmark my books and make them so horribly messy that if someone was to flick my book or I never loan any books. If I like a friend very much, I'll buy him a book. Not even my nieces, my nephews. No one is allowed to. But I pockmarked them so badly that it's not a collector's item anymore. So when I was going through the contents, I would say, usually the pencil is used after a pause, but here it went on and on because anything significant which catches the eye, I tend to underline it or something. And I love the dedication of in the book to stone and water. I said, what can be so lyrical and so representative of his passion, his pursuit of the, Stepwells, and I am sure no one is going to forget them ever after. And then there are a whole kind of very nice quotes. I like these small things in books. For me, a book is a printed book is a work of art of many dimensions, and it's of course a literary, or a professional. So I would first request Yeshwant. I can call you Yeshwant, sir. Yeshwant.
Please call me Yeshwant. Yes.
Okay. So Yeshwant, I learned through another video that you literally strayed into the stepwells of Telangana. It was for a site selection of some project, and you stumbled upon them. I think that's a great mystery story which we must share with the audiences.
Thank you so much, Rajnish and Manju, for these wonderful words of introduction. But to get to the beginning of the story, Rajnish, I will show you a picture of the first stepwell that we stumbled upon and how this happened. The state of Telangana was formed in the year 2014. Before that, it used to be unified Andhra Pradesh. And soon after the state of Telangana came into being, the people of Telangana began to take a lot of pride in their own identity, in their own culture, both in the tangible as well as the intangible cultures of the people suddenly came to the forefront. And I took it upon myself to learn a little more about the traditional architecture of Telangana, not as one sees it in the city of Hyderabad, but as one sees it in the hinterland. And I began to travel every weekend into some of the districts of Telangana, looking for stories, looking for the architecture, looking for the history of the built form. And on one of these trips, we actually got to see the home of a Dora. And the word Dora in Telugu means Zamindar. And we went and took photographs of this very beautiful house. And after that, me and two architects who were with me in the car looked for a shady spot on the highway to have our lunch. And while we were doing that, a villager came up and said, in Telugu, would you like to see a well? And I thought to myself, why would I want to see a cylindrical well, which was a hole in the ground? And he was pointing to something that was pretty close to where we were sitting. All we could see from 50 yards away was a very low parapet wall. But when we walked to it, we found this stupendous stepwell that you're seeing on the screen now, the picture on the left. It will come up in a moment. Okay, so that's the first stepwell that we found. And as you can see, it occupies almost half an acre of land on its periphery. And it has a whole series of galleries, pavilions, steps. And this was most breathtaking. It was a life-changing moment for me. And it was something that literally raised the hair on my hand. So we came back to Hyderabad and we said, let's start researching about stepwells. And when we went on the internet, we found no evidence of stepwells in Telangana at all. The only ones that we had all heard of were the ones in Gujarat and Rajasthan and a few in northern Karnataka. So along with the group of people that you see in this photograph, who constitute the Hyderabad Design Forum, we started going to different government departments of Telangana. We went to the endowments department, no answers. We went to the revenue department, no answers about stepwells. We went to the archaeology department, there again we drew a blank. So it really came to be that we had to go mile on mile, village to village, town to town, asking people, temple to temple, dargah to dargah, whether there was a stepwell in the vicinity. And over the next 5 years that it took us to research this book, we went from a zero knowledge of stepwells to about 175 till the point where we published the book. The interesting thing is that none of us in this photograph who are all architects by profession, none of us are historians, none of us are archaeologists, except one person who had done a course in conservation. We were all practicing architects, very kind of mundane, if you'd like to call it that, practices within the city. But this idea of researching stepwells grabbed all of us. And so it took a lot of time because we didn't have the resources. And then COVID happened. So for about 2 years, 2.5 years, our research stopped. But that really is the beginning of the story of why and how we began to research stepwells.
Yeah, that's a perfect curtain raiser for us to delve a little deeper into the various aspects of stepwells. But at first, immediate reaction is, of course, there are no stepwells in the area where, in the region where I live, and they tend to be happening more in the dry states, Rajasthan, Gujarat, and Telangana. Although North India is also very, very dry. And I was just wondering, immediately this curiosity, this thought came to me. Why, you have identified 175 stepwells in Telangana. So why is such a dense clustering?
Well, as you rightly said, the weather conditions in Telangana are pretty much similar to what you have in Gujarat and Rajasthan. We are a hot, semi-arid, dry climate, and we don't have too many rivers in this part of the country. So the rainwater that falls during the monsoon season has to be caught, it has to be made available for both agriculture and other purposes. The other thing is that we are the Deccan Plateau is almost entirely sheetrock. There's granite between 27 and 30 feet deep. So we don't have stepwells which are deeper than that. All of them are between 25, 26 feet because that's where the water table is. So that explains why we have so many stepwells. Predominantly, these were used for agriculture.
Probably that's the reason, because Punjab was much better irrigated, and of course, but we'll leave that aside. I'm glad that there are more stepwells and than less stepwells, and I was also uh, very fascinated by the foreword written by the the name is little sort of expert on stepwells of Gujarat, Dr. Jutta Jain Nabier. I can't pronounce the name, but I think
Yes.
that was connecting many dimensions of this subject. And even in your introduction, the invocation in Rig Veda is, I mean, I'm not an expert, but I'm just a passing, that water is the giver of life. And water is, I mean, so important, and it still will remain important and will become more important. And connecting, starting from that, you know, ancient, or you can say the core of our country's civilizational, depth, and then taking it forward. And there are a whole lot of connections made with the water, and harvesting of water tanks in the temples, and even in other religions of this subcontinent, water is very much important in Islamic architecture as well.
Yes.
Yeah, in modern architecture, Corbusier is used as extensively, not for the same reasons. But water, one is, of course, ablutions. The other is your very important, which the book highlights, that irrigation networks. Irrigation networks, it was building up a chain of irrigation networks. And would you like to elaborate a little more on that? That how this network was happening.
I think we need to go back to the Kakatiya dynasty to understand that they built up a very elaborate system of irrigation because water was so scarce and they had to conserve every drop of it in order to be able to use it in their fields and to prosper. And they built an extensive network of streams, of irrigation tanks, and step wells continued to be a very vital part of this entire network. In this picture that you see here on the left, you'll see a step well, and you can see that there are people in it. And like you rightly said a little while ago, they are venerating water for its life-giving properties. And in the Hindu scriptures, you see this person here who's also in a tank and he's having a bath, and the act of ablution is very important. So these were the religious aspects of stepwells that came in. But yes, the irrigation aspects were very important. And Telangana, under the Kakatiya dynasty especially, and later on even under the Qutub Shahis and the Asif Shahis, was more or less self-sufficient in water, despite the fact that there was very meager rainfall in this region. And one of the reasons is that they managed water so well.
Yeah, managing the water is, both in the ancient times and the present times, because in Persia, they would have water bodies deep into the soil, and then connect them with underground canals, because the evaporative losses were so high in the hot climates of that land. And so kanats they were called. So water conservation, one can see a lot in Islamic architecture, gardens. There is a celebration of water, but there is also water conservation, so that the losses of percolation are not there. But that is not the focus today, and the focus is more on the forgotten stepwells of Telangana. You bring very fascinating connections between living culture and the stepwells. They might have been forgotten, in everyday use, with the taps being there. But there's one chapter in your book. It's called "Women, Well, Water, the Connect." I
Yes.
think that, and the poster that Manju has made for your talk today, has very much the focuses on the colorful women.
Yes.
And we are, of course, impositions, both of us. And so I will take the focus back on the connection that you make in your book.
Yes, sir. Um, Wherever we went, we discovered, and this is common knowledge, it's no great eureka discovery, is that when it came to the domestic lives of people in Telangana, it was the women of the house who actually went, collected water, brought it back into the home, who drew water out of the well, and therefore they played a large role in using of the step wells that we have. Also, there were very powerful women, both in the Kakatiya dynasty and amongst the Samastan Rajas of Telangana, who were feudal landlords. And the Ranis of these parts actually commissioned the construction of step wells. It was considered to be um, a Sanatana Dharma. So it was giving back to society something that was a gift of God and sharing it with the people. And these powerful women not only made it possible for water to be shared and available to people who were under their feudal system of hierarchy, but they were very shrewd women. They also monetized water. So for sharing the water with smaller farmers, they started charging a tax. And this we find is the first example that water becomes a commodity. And there's a revenue which is being generated from water, which travels from the common man, the common farmer, up to the Samastan Raja, and then it goes up all the way in the hierarchy to the Nizam of Hyderabad.
That's that's a smart move, I would say. And even now we get water bills, so nothing is. Sorry. Another aspect that I was, you know, quite fascinated, enigmatic aspect, is the various symbols and iconography, because from let us say a very basic function of providing water,
Yeah.
sustenance up to life,
Yeah.
they become objects of veneration, and there is a sanctity attached to them, and thereby they become they are elevated to a kind of sacredness, or I won't call it temple, but certainly a sacred domain. So, and many symbols you have mentioned in your book. I thought those would be, and if you can show and explain, or whatever is possible in this limited time.
Yes, sir. I'm just give me a moment. I'm trying to pull up some of the images. Second. Yes. So, yes. This is an example of the iconography that we find in the Stepwells. Starting with Ganesh, who is omnipresent. You find a lot of him. You have pictures of Hanuman. There are a lot of images of Devi, Shakti. So these are recurring themes and recurring images. But more than that, we find fertility symbols in all these Stepwells. I don't have a picture of it right here on the screen with me. But women in the birthing positions, zoomorphic forms, who are in the process of, giving birth. So water and the aspects of fertility are brought out in most of the Stepwells. Unlike the Stepwells in Gujarat, which have a lot more iconography, we just have a very few images in Stepwells in Telangana. But certainly people who were using them would go and say a little prayer, maybe break a coconut, and then start off their activity around the stepwell.
Besides invoking the gods, or you can say worshipping them while in the act of getting water, obeisance to the gods. The something which is I see in some of the examples, but not all of them, is that the there are pavilions, or a kind of corridor where I would assume that hundreds or thousands of years ago, when a group of women was coming, with the matkas on their head to pull water in them, they would also become social interaction spaces, those pavilions, because the sun would be very hot. So those, I mean, Adalaj near Ahmedabad, it has got magnificent pavilion spaces. So, would you think that that would be
Yes, we did in the process of documenting stories, meet a lot of women who told us about how during the hot summer afternoons they would go down into the galleries of these stepwells to stay cool, because it was much cooler closer to the water. And the sight and sound of water being drawn up and the splashing of water as it was going up was a means of passive cooling. So they would spend all afternoon here exchanging recipes, reciting poetry. There were even marriage contracts which were made by women when they were sitting in wells. Songs were sung, stories were told, flowers were strung into garlands. So all this kind of activity of women in Stepwells during the summer are some of the stories that we encountered and that we have recorded for the book.
I'm sure on another day you would play some of those folk songs that might still be alive, or a sense of the lilt, which because it would be so marvelous to see a mundane function becoming a socially rich and vibrant.
Yes.
Uh, I'm going to step aside from Telangana to my city in connection with when water is so primordial connection between you know human beings. And but it is one thing to there's a tube well or there is a well. It doesn't happen in that kind of source. But when you have steps going down, descending down to the water, and then the connection is very different. It's a magical, Chandigarh, I'm sure you have been. The Sukhna Lake has got kind of, ghats along the promenade, the steps, and we have the huge tradition of ghats. And I've seen that people, for all age groups, they like to take off their shoes, put their feet in the water. One is playing music, someone is soulfully philosophizing, some are romancing. So what it evokes, it there is some magic that happens when when human beings and water make a physical contact, visual contact, and then there is a physical contact.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. I think one of the reasons could be that there is so much water within our own bodies that might be the reason we connect with water. It's also so relaxing to be close to water. We also consider water to be purifying. Um, More than anything else, I think it's like you used the word magical a couple of times in your description. There is a magical quality to the touch, feel, and sight of water, and even to the sound of water. And these are experiences that people recounted while we discovered these stepwells in Telangana. There's one stepwell that I'd like to share with you at this point in time, which is the Malaka Bai Chanda stepwell. Just pulling up the images. Yes. So this is a fascinating story about this courtesan whom you see here on the left. And her name is Malaka Bai. She was born Hindu, but converted to Islam. She was a Dabai, a very, very good poet, a musician, a dancer. She was a very talented woman. She lived in the era of the second Nizam. And in return for the services that she bestowed upon the lands, including, war strategy and defense strategy, she was given a jagir. And the jagir was several thousands of acres in what is today Osmania University. And she, in order to irrigate her own land, built definitely 2, maybe 3 stepwells, one of which is in the campus of the English and Foreign Language University. At different points in its life, it's like the picture that you see here. But then along came some students who decided that they wanted to do something about this. And they took it upon themselves to begin to clean up the stepwell. Like you said, in the act of doing so, water came back into the stepwell and it became an area where people could go and relax. Students could go and enjoy the surface of the water. But then also it became an area for cultural activity. So in the picture that you see at the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see that chairs have been arranged and the galleries of this stepwell are now being used for cultural programs. When the stepwell was recommissioned after it was restored, Pandit Jasraj was invited to perform here. And he went into these galleries, which is the red gallery you see, and sat there and said that he was going to sing without the aid of artificial amplification, and only by the light of diyas, which were oil lamps, which were lit in the niches. So this was a magical evening, and people said they not only heard the water and saw the water, but they were able to smell the water as Pandit Jasraj sang his music. So this entire experience, a sensory experience of water, came out when we were researching, and we were told about it when we went to study this stepwell.
So I think I have to immediately come to Telangana stepwells, and but there are very interesting connections. Some things never change. We are talking about sensory qualities of water. They have happened. One of my, in fact, areas of study had been the water as an element of landscape in the Mughal gardens, and they have used it as, when the fountains are there. The it's not only has a cooling impact, but also there is a choreography, and there is a so there are, one can go on and on talking about sensory qualities of water, but leaving that aside, right now the stepwells, or were they both, and I'm sure they were both natural, source of water, the subsoil water coming up, and also at the same time of for water harvesting. So whatever little rain happened, so they were must be doing dual function.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It's a combination of both. Many of them are fed by underground aquifers, which are sometimes seasonal aquifers. Many of them are collection points for subsoil, for surface water, and some of them for both. So in some of the stepwells we went, which were absolutely dry, and which now the government has taken upon itself to restore, the underground aquifers have got reactivated again. But the level of water we found in these 5 years that we kept visiting them keeps going up and down according to the season. So they all work on the principle that water finds its own level. And if you look at the larger water bodies in the area, there is a direct connection between the level of the water in the stepwell and the level of the water in the reservoir or the tank, which is closest to it. But rainwater also percolates through the soil, and rainwater runoff from the surface also collects into the stepwells.
No, so water divining you have mentioned in your book, and I found it very fascinating because if you look at the archives, which revolve around finalizing the present site of Chandigarh, there were all kind of serious criticisms that this would be another Daulatabad because there was no natural source of water or river going along, and the dependence on bore wells would be disastrous. But leaving aside the longy story, there is a I have seen myself an old clipping in the newspaper that water diviners were called with their forked stick, about which you mention in your book.
Yes,
You
yes,
have an illustration, and so I mean, is that great tradition of the vernacular, if one may say, still there? Because they prove to be fairly right in Chandigarh. You know.
yes. We actually interviewed two water diviners in different parts of the state. And both of them first began by telling us that certain trees are indications of subsoil water, especially the neem tree. Also, a lot of the other vegetation around it and ant hills and snake pits are also one of the early indicators that there is subsoil water there. We actually watched one person who has the ability to divine water look up at a branch in a neem tree, which was in the shape of a Y, and he chopped it off with his axe and came down. And then he held both the arms of the Y and he walked around. And at certain points, as he was walking around, involuntarily, the tail of the Y began to oscillate and began to move in an upward direction. So this man has certain electromagnetic properties in his body by which he is able to use very simple systems like this to divine the presence of underground water. And we actually saw this happen.
All right, we will leave the water diviner to his, his magic, and I can see the clock ticking, and we are also supposed to leave some time for question and answer. But I have one more aspect to talk about, which is actually very critical, and you have covered it. Or in fact, you mentioned it right now when Pandit Jasraj was invited to, because you have a chapter called Restore, Revive, Rejoice. You demonstrated all those three things. But I was wondering, as a, you can say that a cynic or a, because how many, it's happening in Delhi also. There are monuments everywhere. In the case of Stepwells, with voluntary effort, if they're restored, but then how do you keep them? They stay restored, and the only way is that it becomes a cultural stake. There is a stakeholders, the community, but that might be easier said than done. And you have done such a laborious, rigorous work. So would you be worried about some of the stepwells which you cleaned up and all, uh, going back to the derelict state?
The moment the community gets sensitized into the history and the beauty of having a stepwell restored, the whole community comes together, I think, and begins to take part in it and begins to enjoy it. And it becomes a kind of something that everybody takes pride in. As we began this book, our aim was only to document these stepwells. It just happened as we went along and we made several presentations that certain people who were working in government said, why don't we take this to the next stage? So there was one person from our team who stepped out of the team and went on to take on restoration of stepwells in a serious way. And she then brought together several arms of the government and restored stepwells. One of them is in the city of Secunderabad, very close to where I live, where originally there were no traces of a stepwell at all. We only got to know about it because we were looking at these old maps dated 1918, and we found on those maps that there must have been a stepwell here. But when we went to it, we actually found that it was a flat piece of land and there were cars parked on it. But then as we began to excavate, 2,000 trucks later, we discovered the most magnificent stepwell there. There was a lot of anger when we began to do this by people in the community because we were taking away their parking lot. But once the government stepped in and started putting in the infrastructure of roads and parks and seats and street lighting, and then it became a community activity. And lo and behold, the natural level of bore wells in the community also came up. The water table rose. And therefore, I think it became something that everybody became proud of and wanted to own. So this is that stepwell which I was talking about. It's in a place called Bansilal Pet, and that is it in the process of being restored, and that's how it looks today.
So magnificent. Absolutely. I'm sure the community would but own it and be its custodians. I'm going to now try and close down. Much that I would like to go on sometime. And I, would like to share this beautiful painting that you commissioned, especially for the book. This is, I thought it was such a good idea to have the folk art revived and telling the narrative power of for our folk art or our Indian painting systems. Everything is happening, is full of action, and there are expressions, and you can keep on reading. It's the perfect miniature in the representation of Indian art. And I'm so glad you have someone, keeping that tradition alive. And so there are good things still being revived and being kept alive by valiant souls like you and your friends and the Hyderabad Design Forum. I, felicitate them and I congratulate them for the marvelous work they have done.
Thank you so much. Been a pleasure speaking to you, sir.
My pleasure is mine. Manju, back to you now.
Let's not close the conversation. Yeshwant, why don't you tell us about the Batkama story?
Okay.
We have to go back to the picture again.
Okay.
Because there are some songs also, Batkama, Batkama, and even in Hindi cinema, the same song was used.
Right. So we've tried to capture this.
1 minute. Yeshwant, meanwhile, those who've logged in, please put your suggestions, your comments in the chat box. And don't go away because we always end the session with everybody on the screen so that we can take a nice screenshot of all the faces. Yeah? Yes, Yeshwant, tell us about the Batkama.
Batkama is today the state festival of Telangana, and it takes place sometime soon after Dasara. There's been a lot of rainfall. The tanks are full, the stepwells are full of water, the fields are green, and then the women of the village get together to propitiate the goddess, who is Durga or Kali. And they create these small conical things that you see here, which are called batkamas, and they are meant actually to look like the gopuram of a temple. So these are made out of flowers, different seasonal flowers, starting with chrysanthemums and marigolds and so many other varieties of flowers that spring up soon after the monsoon season are created. And right at the top, they have a little piece of haldi. And then they put them in a circle and they sing this beautiful song called Batkama, Batkama. Batkama means Geo. If you were to translate it into Hindi, it means Geo Devi. So it's a song to propitiate the goddess. And this way, they clap their hands and they sing the song. Then you can see in this picture here that the Sarpanch is taking the largest of the Batkamas and he's descending the steps and he's slowly immersing these Batkamas into the surface of the water. And he's followed by all the women, and all these Batkamas are taken and floated on the surface of the water. We thought, why would they want to do this? I'm sure it's going to pollute the water. But then in the analysis that we did of Batkama, we discovered through people who were botanists that each of these plant species actually has chlorophyll, which can purify the water and impart to it certain characteristics which are healing, which have the healing power. So that is the story of Batkama. And the picture that you see here is painted by a man from a village called Cheriyal. And this style of art is called Cheriyal art painting. It's a narrative style that actually tells a story from the Jatakas and the Ramayana and so on. But I spoke to him and said, why don't you draw the Batkama in your own village? And he came up with this picture, which is how this traditional art of Telangana has become the cover of our book.
So very fascinating. Thank you. Thank you. Right, Manju?
Yeah, that's
After
a
you.
great story. That's a great story. And I'm wondering what's happened to our audience, the people who've logged in. Are they so overwhelmed that they have no questions? You know, a lot of us, a lot of people who are listening in, they all, most of them are students of literature, but many of them are creative writers too. And I'm sure what you've talked about and what you've shown us would make an excellent backdrop. It will all that we've seen together, all that we've heard today, will probably be woven into some stories at some point of time. Now, Yeshwant, you've been working in this area for so long. Is there anything that you may have left out that you would like to share with us? Any stories related to these stepwells, legends, folklores?
Yeah, Mandu, there are so many of them that it's very difficult to telescope them into a short period of time that we have together. But I would like to say that stepwells have come back into society. And we are beginning to see that stepwells are now being used for different cultural events. People are hosting weddings in them. Classical dancers are choosing stepwells to go and perform in them. Music performances are taking place. Fashion shoots are happening. Architect Charles Correa, for example, uses the valve, which is another form of a stepwell in his architecture. So they are coming back into contemporary society. And I think in the process of telling the stories of stepwells, in some ways we have played Sutradhar and we have sensitized people to realize that these stepwells play such an important and such a vital role in our lives in different ways.
We have Ashwini Sabharwal also who's logged in. Ashwini, would you like to say something? Why don't you switch on your video? Let me see. Let me ask again. Anybody else would like to say something?
Manju, Sumit is there, who's been
Yeah.
my
Yes, Sumit ma'am. Sumit ma'am, why don't you switch on your video and come onto the screen? I'm sure you would like to add something. Or anybody from your side, Yeshwant, from your office?
No, I think you're fine, Manju. Thank you so much.
All right. So can I ask? Yeah, here we have Ashwini Sabharwal. Would you like to say something, Ashwini? You will have to unmute. Rajnish, would you introduce him, please? You know him better than I do.
Yeah, well, let him, while he's fixing the technology,
Unmute, please, Ashwini.
Ashwini is my classmate. We did architecture together, which means we are buddies, architectural buddies from 67 onwards. It's a very old connection. And he was not only the chief architect of Haryana, but also the vice chancellor of Rohtak Visual Arts University. And it's a very longish CV if I have to go into it. But will all I can say is that he's not only a bum chum, but he's a very distinguished person. So it's good to have
Ashwini, you need to unmute yourself. Unmute yourself and say a few words, please. You can't unmute yourselves.
Ashwini.
Well, there seems to be some problem. No, there seems to be some problem. I'm asking him to unmute, but he says he can't. Huh? Right.
In the meantime, you can ask.
Hello. Finally got
Yes.
you.
Sumit,
Yes. Please come onto the screen, Sumit, madam.
Yeah, this was such a wonderful presentation. I really enjoyed. And I think this discovery should go on in other places also. I'm sure we'll be able to unearth, quite a few more. In fact, I remember having seen one in Delhi. Has somebody researched that too? I think I would like to go back and see that now after reading and seeing all your slides and hearing this presentation. What is also fascinating is it's not just us Indian. And today, when we talk about water management, resource management, and the water crisis going up, I think the relevance of, unearthing them and revitalizing them is so very important. Besides the magical and the social charm that has been so beautifully discussed today. What fascinates me also is the international recognition which stepwells are getting today. In fact, in our very old, I keep visiting New York very often, and I was pleasantly surprised to see a very beautiful, copper glazed structure right in the heart of a new development, called the Hudson River Development. And that project, the architect has clearly said, was inspired by stepwells. Instead of taking the stepwells down, he has uplifted the form and produced a sculpture, with a vertical kind of stepwell, and taking on the New Yorkers desire to run and their habit of running and walking and all. He provided, I think, 104 or 105 odd steps, going up. So, recognizing the social aspect of these step wells, he's taken that clue and built on this beautiful structure. It went through some problems, like people taking it as a area to, go up and commit suicide. So they had to retrofit it. But again, that Indian recognition of this water management thing has really been brought to the limelight by this massive, sculpture, which is a selfie point for everybody now. So I think, India needs to really work on what its resource, what it has. And in fact, when you talk about stepwells, the other thing which we are losing on is the water bodies, which were there earlier and which, like you mentioned, have been converted into parking lots. Chandigarh itself, we have so many villages here, and a lot of these water bodies have been, totally spoiled and done. In fact, I just like to add that in Sector 42, they wanted to create a tank, because they were using Sukna Lake for Visarjan and all. When I saw the design, it was just straight walls going down. Then the thought of step wells came to my mind, and I introduced, this was another architect who had done the project. But I thought of the step wells and introduced steps, in Sector 42. And now that is, a very important place for Chhat Puja. So just introducing steps going down into the water and creating and recreating that step well effect itself has made it a public space. So, what wonders our step wells can do if we actually start using them, and especially in this crisis that we are facing or likely to face. I think it's a subject, and the book, I think I'm really tempted. Congratulate you for this wonderful book and this lovely discussion.
Thank
I'm
you so
really
much.
going to pick up the book and, love to read it. And so much effort which you have put in, it should be showcased everywhere, and this effort, not only Telangana, it should become a worldwide phenomenon. Wish you all the best and hope you keep unearthing and discovering and motivating.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. Thank you.
Yeshwant, that's a very senior architect from Chandigarh, huh? Sumit. I was asking her to come onto the screen, but she didn't. But anyway, well, thank you, madam. So great to hear your opinion on the matter.
Was the
There is a yeah.
Smith was the chief architect of Chandigarh when the master
Mhm.
plan was formulated, and
Yeah.
she's now currently the chairperson of the subcommittee on the Heritage Committee, of where I am a member. So she is a very important voice and power in the city.
I think I didn't see the video sign. I think I could have switched it on. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank
So,
you. Great.
So there, she's there now.
Yeah.
We have a young lady here. Yeah. So
Mhm.
here, madam. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us today, for your comment. We have Navdeep out here. Navdeep wants to say something, and after that, Ishtiaq has raised his hand. Navdeep, yes?
I really like the subject. I have always been fascinated by Stepwells. Though I'm from the field of literature, but it was as if something has read my mind. And you organized a lecture on this. So far, I have only heard about Baulis of Rajasthan, Gujarat, Rani Ki Rao, I think, and that famous image of Bauli before that trendy series Bandish Bandit starts. So I was really mesmerized by that, but I hardly knew that there were Baulis in Telangana also. And another, Pandora box has been opened, and I would love to read this book. And I'm interested in architecture, and I think I want to have the feel of place, and I would love to read the book. Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great. Great.
I'd just like
And
to
thank
add,
you,
why don't you
Navdeep.
take it? Can I add something?
Please do, ma'am.
Yeah, a lot of our stepwells, and I think in Gujarat, and Rajasthan, they've taken them up as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So, I mean, I haven't seen the book yet or seen the images, but maybe the ones that you have unearthed could deserve equal recognition or at least heritage status, so that they are preserved for life.
Yes, I must add that, the Aga Khan Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage is in the process of restoring what we call the Qutub Shahi tombs, which was a necropolis in Hyderabad, where all the kings of the Qutub Shahi dynasty are buried. And in addition to over 100 tombs within that garden complex, there are at least 5 beautiful stepwells, the water for which was used to irrigate and for several other ablution, cleaning of the body before it was buried, and so on. And all of these are just about set to become a World Heritage Site. So stepwells included as part of the general necropolis of the Qutub Shahi tombs will get the status that you are hoping they will get.
Wonderful. That's so nice to hear that. Great.
Thank you, ma'am. And Ishtiaq, yes?
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for this wonderful lecture. I just had an observation and also a question. I mean, I was wondering nowadays when, discussions on who built what and if it's really Indian, the architecture of Baulis, they seem to be very syncretic, they seem to represent the syncretic idea of India with the Mughal architecture and the Hindu architecture coming together. So would you like to comment on this?
Absolutely. This is very true of the whole of the state of Telangana itself. One way to describe Telangana is north of south and south of north. That's because of our geographical situation almost in the center of India. And we had cultural influences that came to Telangana from north, south, east, and west, including architecture from different parts of the country. And all that is reflected very much in the architecture of the Baulis. And people kept adding on different structures to Baulis. So although they started off during the Mughal dynasty, during the Qutub Shahi dynasty, and you see, started off during the Kakatiya dynasty, you see Hindu architecture in the beginning, but they were added to, galleries were built, more structures were added during the Qutub Shahi dynasty, and then you see waves of Islamic architecture also coming in to the design of the Baulis.
There's a comment for you, Rajnish. You can have a look at it. And if anybody has any specific questions, why don't you mark it to everyone instead of sending it to me? Because then I have to redirect them. Huh? Yes. All right. So can I ask everybody else to come onto the screen? Please switch on your videos and come onto the screen. Oh, and yes, some of our senior members of our society are here. And let me point them out to you. We have Roshan. Hi, Roshan. That is Roshan. You can unmute yourself and say a few words, Roshan.
Good evening, ma'am. Thank you very much. It was really interesting, very engaging, and I actually come from a very, very small village of Himachal Pradesh, but I was actually sensitized about the fate of our bodies. We call them bodies here, small little wells. And I think as I get back to my village, I would love to have at least a look at what has happened to those bodies out there. And it was a lovely, I would call it a sensitization session. Thank you, Yeshwantji. Thank you very much. And Mr. Rajnish Wattas, thank you very much. It was really, really inspiring. Loved it through and through.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We have Senior Professor Anil Prasad out here. So would you like to say something? Cannot hear you. Can't hear you, sir. And anybody else who would like to speak? I can see a certain Madam Renu, whom I don't know personally. Would you like to say something, ma'am? Unmute, yeah.
I think it was a very interesting and very amazing session. And we must restore our water bodies in villages. And I think some work has been done already in some states. So we must work on it. And I had a question, but I'm not satisfied. How do they keep the water clean?
Okay, I can answer that. The more you use water, the cleaner it gets. If you allow it to stagnate, then algae and fungus begins to form. So it's only in pumping out the water that you can ensure that it's going to stay clean.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, I'd like to say something about Renu. She's also the former chief architect of Chandigarh administration and Haryana,
Wow.
and she's was at the helm of affairs when the Heritage Committee was formed. So she's, you can say, fountainhead of Chandigarh's heritage, and a very, very brilliant architect, and very shy of hogging the limelight, and a good friend.
Thank you for joining us today. Right. So with that, I think we are about to close this session. If there are no more comments, no more suggestions, and no more observations. Rajneesh and Yeshwant, any last ideas that you want to throw at the listeners?
No, I'm fine. You,
Nothing from my side, Manju. Thank you.
my throat is
Okay.
now overstretched. And
It's been a very exciting session, really very different from the kind of sessions we normally have. And you can see there are some young faces out here, some PhD scholars, Shreya, Amandeep, Ishtiaq, yes, Neeraj, and we have some senior people, Santosh Rajguru also here. Ashwini, of course, he tried to talk, but somehow he could not unmute himself, and I couldn't unmute him. But thank you, Ashwini, for being here.
Manju, I have
for a very
one
Yeah?
suggestion. Manju,
Boliye.
hello.
Anji.
Can I
Uh-huh.
one suggestion before you close down? You see, you have been making very interesting connections. You should plan a session on literature and architecture, because recently the Oscar nominated film Brutalist, is about movement and architecture. And I'm sure you will get many architects to join in it from Chandigarh at least.
Okay, Hemraj, where are you, Hemraj? You've just switched off. But make a note of it. Let's discuss it further and see what we can do about it. Yeah.
Sure.
Great idea. We have a few things lined up, and among the topics lined up is something very interesting for all of us, and that is how do we use AI ethically for humanities, for liberal arts. So that's a subject all of us would be interested in. The speaker was ready, but then for some reasons, unavoidable reasons, it was postponed. We're going to have that also very soon. And well, we'll meet again in 2 weeks' time. You'll hear from us again. This session has been recorded. It'll be put up on YouTube and shared on lots of Facebook pages, social media. And well, with that, thank you very much. And we say bye and see you again. Au revoir.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so much.
ma'am. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Yeshwant. Thanks, Rajnish.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.